Today I'd like to share with you a little bit about what Grace Lutheran Church does for its catechesis program. One of the things that I've learned after being at Grace for 20 years is to take the long-term view toward confirmation, that it doesn't happen overnight, that you train these children over time. As you can see in the slide, that's one kid growing up here in the congregation. He's still not confirmed yet, but it's a process, and you don't have to do everything in 1 year. The other thing I've learned is to be flexible. That there's often days where I go into the confirmation class and I have certain plans, and this is what I'm going to cover. And a kid will ask a question, and another kid asks a question, and rather than stifle those questions to get the material done, I will pursue those questions because that's something that they don't know and that they want to learn more about. And so it's important to be flexible as well as you teach confirmation. And the third thing, overarching, is relationships. That to form a relationship with those kids is important so that they continue on when they're in youth group, and that they enjoy coming to confirmation and invite their friends. Oftentimes at our confirmation classes, we will have, and especially the youth group, we'll have not just members from our church, but non-members. In fact, this past year, it's probably been about 60% of the kids that come to youth group are not from the congregation. And I think the kids feel comfortable bringing their friends because they know that there's a relationship between them and their pastor and their vicar. I kind of take my confirmation model from Luther in his small catechism. In the preface to it, these are some of the words that he says. These slides with Luther up on the top right are from that small catechism preface. He says, "Therefore I beg you all for God's sake, my dear sirs and brethren, who are pastors or preachers, to devote yourselves heartily to your office. Have pity on the people who are entrusted to you, and help us to teach the catechism to the people, especially to the young." The catechism is the layman's Bible. It contains all the major teachings of the Bible in the shortest, smallest form. And so you're not teaching them something different than the Bible when you teach the catechism. You're teaching them the Bible itself. Luther says, in the first place, let the preacher above all be careful to avoid many versions or various texts and forms of the Ten Commandments, the Lord's Prayer, the Creed, the sacraments, and such. He should choose from one form which he holds and teaches all the time, year after year. Having that one form and doing it similarly really helps with kids. If you're constantly changing the text, it makes it very difficult for them. And then here's how he says he does it. He says, teach them first of all these parts, the Ten Commandments, the Creed, the Lord's Prayer, and so on, according to the text, word for word, so that they too can repeat it in the same way after you and commit it to memory. So Luther first off says, have them memorize it. You might remember when you were a kid memorizing the catechism, and you might not have known why. But that's the basic. Once you get that in your head, then the next parts all come about. And even the youngest kids, the younger the kids are, the easier they have memorizing this. And you'll see as we do our program why we start a little bit younger and how we do this. But we first start with memorizing the catechism. Luther then says, in the second place, after they've learned the text well, teach them the meaning also, so that they know what it means. Again, choose the form of these tables or some brief uniform method, whichever you like, and hold to it. Do not change a single syllable, as just said about the text. Take your time doing this, for it's not necessary for you to explain all the parts at once. One after another. So after they've learned what it is, what the catechism is, and memorizing it, then you open it up and explain it to them. It's often like when you were a kid, you learned the ABCs. You recited the ABCs. You didn't understand what ABC meant or why, but you recited them. Same thing, you did the same thing with math. 1 + 1 is 2. 2 + 2 is 4. And you memorized multiplication tables. You didn't understand it all at first. You just memorized it, but then what did you do next? Then the teacher explained why you did that, and you put the letters together and made words and sounds. You put the numbers together and made equations and figured out problems. Same thing with the catechism. First memory, then explaining the meaning. And then the third place, after you've taught them this short catechism, then take up the large catechism and give them also a richer and fuller knowledge. Here enlarge upon every commandment, article, petition, and part, with its various works, uses, benefits, dangers, and injuries, as you find these abundantly stated in many books written about these matters. So once you've then taught them that, then you make it even richer. In our congregation, we do that more so in youth group. And this is something that the kids don't know is happening, but in our youth group, I'm teaching them the catechism just as I did when they were kids, but in a completely different way, and I'll explain that when we get to youth group. So we start confirmation here with a pre-confirmation camp, even before they start catechism. And we usually do it 5 days in June. This coming year, it's going to be the second week of June, and we do it in the mornings, Monday through Friday, for those who have completed 4th and 5th grade. A little bit younger than a lot of groups start. And it's a great time to begin a pastoral relationship with the kids. That's when I first start to really get to know them better. And the purpose is to prepare them for confirmation instruction. The problems that we try and address with pre-confirmation camp is memory, getting it done, and the younger the better. Those younger kids, they pick up those memory stuff so much faster than the older kids. And also biblical illiteracy. I found that not all the kids go to Sunday school. Not all the kids are taught in their home with devotions each night, and so they don't know the Bible stories. And so the two things that we try and address in confirmation camp are both memory work and then also knowledge of the Bible and the Bible stories. It's kind of like a sports camp, and that's where I got the idea, is every year all the kids are going to football camp and volleyball camp and basketball camp and cheerleading camp and music camp, and I thought, well, why don't we have a confirmation camp? And if you go to those camps, the focus is mainly on the basics, on learning for basketball how to pass and how to shoot, and learning the different plays. Or football, it's learning how to block and all those basic things that you do in every play. Same thing in confirmation camp. We're learning the basics of the catechism and the basics of the Bible. So our schedule for pre-confirmation camp is from 9 o'clock till 10 o'clock in the morning. For an hour, we do memory work. And pretty simply, we just repeat it over and over and over again. And when one of the kids feels like they can recite it individually, they raise their hand. And usually there's one kid in the class that always wants to raise his hand first. Some classes you get two that are competing with each other, but they raise their hand when they know it. They recite it individually. Then we go back and recite it again until someone else raises their hand. Once everyone in the class is able to recite it individually, then we go on to the next part. Usually we make it through about half the catechism in 5 days or 5 hours. And then those kids, those 4th, 5th graders that have completed 4th and 5th grade, know those parts pretty well. I do a lot of positive reinforcement. So when the kids get it, especially some of the ones that are a little bit slower or that have a harder time, it's really neat to see, because you'd think, oh, this is such drudgery. How in the world do kids do that for an hour? It's surprising how good they feel when they accomplish it and they can do it. And we go back and review it again, different times during the morning. And the kids have a good feel when they're done that they've accomplished something, and it unites the class in a way. They all have something that they're sharing in common. From 10 o'clock to 11, then we go into a snack and game time. Oftentimes, if it's nice in June outside, we'll go out and play kickball, or if it's rainy or that, we'll play some games down in the church basement, a hide and seek kind of game. We usually give them a snack. And those are good times for relationship building and just to let them blow off some steam so that they can come back. And from 11 to 12, then we do a Bible overview. 1 year, I do the Old Testament, and the next year, I do the New Testament. And we do 12 stories each day, which works out to be 5-minute stories, and 60 stories over the week. So in that week, we cover all your major Bible stories of the Old Testament and all your major Bible stories of the New Testament in almost like an MTV fashion. If you look on this slide, you can see in the background behind the vicar there a board, and we have pictures. We use PowerPoint of the pictures, and we're changing the PowerPoints probably every 20 seconds. So they have something visual they're looking at as we're telling the story. The vicar and I are usually sitting next to each other, and one's frantically looking at what the next 5-minute story is, just to remember and remind in our head what we need to cover, while the other one is presenting his, and we just kind of a tag team. One does Adam and Eve, and the next one does the fall, and the next one does Cain and Abel, and then Noah's Ark, and just 5-minute stories. So by the end of the week and in the end of the 2 years, they know one half of the Bible, or the end of the 2 years, they know the whole Bible, and they've heard at least all those stories before they ever get into confirmation. So when we get into confirmation and we're doing the parts where we do an illustration and mention a Bible story, they've at least heard it, not maybe fully, but they've heard the basics of those stories. We also try and tie those stories together. So oftentimes what happens in Sunday school, a kid that goes to Sunday school all the time, they know all those stories, but they don't see how they interrelate. And so for those kids that do know their Bible stories, it's advantageous for them because they see how those stories all relate to each other. So this pre-confirmation camp is something that we do that's unique in the district, and I think it's a great benefit for further confirmation. During the year, then we do catechesis or catechism classes from 3rd to 8th grade, and that's done after school. And the schedule kind of goes like this. From 3:45, they usually start trickling in about 3:45. We provide a snack for them. The parents take turns either bringing a snack, or they can pay money, and then Lorna will go out and get a snack for them. And they're hungry coming home from school. At 4 o'clock, then we go into the church and we recite the catechism together. We start with the 10 Commandments, and we go all the way through the whole catechism. It takes about 15 or 20 minutes. But doing that 30 times a year, from 3rd grade to 8th grade, guess what happens? They know their catechism really well. And we don't have to give them any tests. Our catechism teacher, the 3rd and 4th grade teacher loves this so much better, in the sense that she used to have to gather each kid by themselves, have them recite it to them while the other kids are going crazy. This way, they're learning it naturally, just like many of you probably learned the Creed. You probably didn't sit down and memorize the Creed or the Lord's Prayer. You just heard it often enough over and over again. And so we do that. And then from 4:20 to 5:15, we have class. And here's kind of what it looks like when we do the reciting in the church, the catechism. Here, vicars leading the kids. so they go through that all the way through the Catechism, from the start with the Ten Commandments, all the way through the Creed, the Lord's Prayer, the baptism, confession, absolution, Lord's Supper. And it's amazing. They come all hyper and they're jumpy right after school. They get done with that, and guess what they're like? They completely mellowed out. It's kind of a neat thing to see how it helps that way as well. The third and fourth graders then go in for what we call weekday school. That's led by one of our members, and they study out of My First Catechism is the book that it's called, and then they also do an activity book that goes along with it, My First Catechism activity book, and those are based mainly on Bible stories, and so they're learning the first commandment, but a Bible story that deals with having no other gods when that day comes. And so that's kind of what goes on in weekday school. For confirmation class from 5th to 8th grade, they go in with Vicar, and he teaches them 1 year they do the Old Testament, and the next year they do the New Testament. And here they're getting 1 or 2 Bible stories. Is that right? 1 or 2 Bible stories a day. And as you can see in his class, there's all kinds of posters listed up on the board that go along with what he's teaching to try and give them a timeline. And they go through those stories that they had learned once already in 5 minutes. Now they're learning them over a period of 20 or 30 minutes and getting them more in depth so that they'll have the Bible material ready once they get into 7th and 8th grade. In 7th and 8th grade, then we go through the Catechism, and that's taught by the pastor, and we use the Bible and the Catechism as our main textbooks. Basically, we go through the Catechism from cover to cover using the explanations section to the Catechism. And as I said earlier, I don't care how far or how fast I get through it. I want them to learn the stuff deeply, and I have 2 years to take them through it. Some years I get 3/4 of the way through, and then I start at that point the next year, and then wrap around, and some years I get all the way through the Catechism. The other thing that we do kind of unique that other churches might not do is we do a confirmation retreat. This is different than the camp. The camp was the basics. The retreat we do in late August, early September, and that's for those that are going into confirmation. We do that down at Camp Luther in Schuyler. I usually try and find a week when we're the only ones there, and so it's just our kids and parents, and it's a great time to get to know those confirmation kids before they start confirmation. They get to see the new vicar and myself and get to know us better as that we're real people, that we might snore, that we do all kinds of weird things, that we're not, that we're regular people. But it also gives us some time to have some fun and to do some instruction. Some of the fun activities that we do is they do archery there. Some years there's that slip and slide set up if it didn't get torn up during the year. There's paddle boats and canoes. We do a challenge course. That's what they're doing all on that beam, and the challenge course causes them to work together to do things that they need to rely on each other for. But also we do some instruction time, about 3 hours worth, and I find that instruction time very helpful for me in class, because usually I cover the 1 year we'll do the Lord's Prayer, and 1 year we'll do why we worship the way that we do. And then I go back and do prayer, and so then in confirmation I don't have to cover the Lord's Prayer, and also then we get in why we do what we do in worship, which is not in the Catechism. And so having those 3 sessions gives us time to cover those things. We usually leave about 4:30, stop and have dinner in Norfolk to save some money. They each bring money for their dinner. Camp Luther, I think, charges, well, I shouldn't say it for sure, but it's $8 or $9 for dinner, and they can do a lot cheaper than that at the mall in Norfolk. We usually arrive about 7:30. We do a study, a night hike to wear them out, then a campfire and snacks, evening devotions, lights out, and then the next morning we do devotions, teaching them how to do evening and morning devotions as part of it. Then we have another study, breakfast. I usually bring cereal. Kids are fine with cereal, and it's a lot cheaper than having the camp make us breakfast. Then we do the challenge course. Then we go on the swing. You can see pictures of the kids there on the swing. They jump off that platform and into the middle of a gully and high up in the air, kind of fun for them. It gives some of them that are afraid, they learn to challenge themselves that way. Then we go to archery. We have lunch. We grill hot dogs that we bring, another cheap meal. And the kids have fun grilling the hot dogs on the sticks and stuff like that. We study again. We go down to the lake, do the canoes and such, pack up and clean and depart. So that's kind of what confirmation retreat is all about. When they get to youth group, what I do is on Wednesdays is we have topics, and I usually try and Vicar and I choose something that's fitting for right now and going on in our society. And what we do, or at least what we try to do, is we look at the Catechism where that topic is. So for instance, maybe in the community someone committed suicide, or you heard something about suicide on television. And so we go to the Catechism, we look at the Fifth Commandment, we read the Bible verses that are about the Fifth Commandment and the like, and then we go down and we talk about suicide. We pull up, the Vicar and I will use those Bible verses in class and talk about the Fifth Commandment, but in a different way than we did in confirmation. In this way, it's more apologetic, more, what would you say to your friend that's trying to commit suicide? Or what if someone said to you, I'm thinking of committing suicide, how would you deal with it? And so we deal with it very practically with things that are going on in their life, but it's tied back to stuff that they learned before. We oftentimes do something on creation at that point. And the idea is they're going to go off in 4 years or 2 years or the next year to college, and those beliefs that they've been taught in the Catechism are going to be questioned, and they're going to be challenged. And how are they going to stand up to it? Well, they've learned a lot of stuff back in 7th and 8th grade and before that will help them get through those, and so we're preparing them for that. And we also have fun. We have different activities. We go out